When Overlord first started to air back in 2015, it had the all too familiar feeling of being a power fantasy. It had the incredible overpowered self-insert main character, the harem of adoring secondary characters all worshipping the ground that the main character stood upon, and the general feeling that you were living out your most fiendish desire of being an overpowered god in a fantasy setting. However, by the end of Season 4, the series had completely lost this feeling of being a power fantasy, instead feeling like a tragic fantasy story. So why then does Overlord no longer feel like a power fantasy? Well, to start with, one of the key essences of an anime being a power fantasy is to focus on the main character's point of view, as you want to self-insert yourself into their world and the actions they commit. So naturally the anime will be nearly exclusively showing the actions of the main character, with the few exceptions being some cutaway scenes to show what is happening to the rest of the world to build context. The first season of Overlord follows this formula to the letter, with the entire season following Ainz and what he's up to in this new world he has been isekai'd into. Nonetheless, after the first season you notice that the main point of view for the world begins to shift, as the main POV characters in Season 2 are the Lizardmen and Sebas, and this trend continues as the series progresses. As even though Ainz is the main character that the series revolves around, you notice an increasing amount of arcs where he is not the one driving the story forwards. This prevents you from feeling the same level of attachment to him, as you do not see the events through his eyes, but rather through another person's, for which his actions may seem less reputable than they would have been if their situation was from only Ainz's viewpoint. This is also motivated by the actions and behaviours he displays as the series goes on. As something you notice that changes over time is the attitude that Ainz has towards non-Nazaric people, as his first action in the series to do with the outside world is to save a random woman and her younger sister who are about to be killed by the slaying bureaucracy. He even gave Enri some items to keep herself safe from future attacks. Compare this to how he treated the workers who he manipulated into attacking Nazaric, with some who were smart enough to leave and do some reconnaissance, instead of plundering the tomb, facing a fate worse than death. Now when you think of some of the most edgy power fantasy series out there, I doubt any of them would go as evil as Ainz goes in these episodes. Hell, even Reader of a Healer, a protagonist whose backstory was an extreme version of Ralph Talia's, doesn't commit as many atrocities as Ainz does against the people who merely inconvenienced him. Part of this, as I referenced earlier, is caused by the change of the point of view from Ainz to his victims, which dramatically changes how you feel about the situations that take place. An easy example of this is comparing how you feel about the Swords of Darkness dying in Season 1, whose backstory is not explained at all, and this scene from Season 3, where after killing Arch, it cuts away to her sisters who are waiting for her to return, even though we know she never will. Now the thing about power fantasies is you actually want to be the one doing the deeds that the main character is doing. And with most people in the world, they don't want to be seen to be the outright bad guy, but rather the hero or anti-hero of the story. Whereas in the later seasons, Ainz becomes the outright bad guy, as he seems to do monstrous things such as committing the virtual genocide of a species for very little gain. This change in Ainz's behaviour is most documented in the use of Mormon throughout the series. Mormon is Ainz's alter ego that he used with Narbal to undertake scouting in the world immediately around Nazaric, such as E-ratel. While in this alter ego he would undertake quests and learn about the political layout of the rest of the world, while also meeting other adventurers and understanding the power levels of this new world. Now at the start of the series, Ainz mainly left Nazaric in this form to keep himself disguised from the general public and to subtly attain his goals. Whilst in this form he became a hero to the common people through the actions he did, such as killing Clementine and defeating Jabaloth. Nevertheless, after Season 2 you notice more and more that Ainz was not using Mormon anymore to scout around until after the massacre of Cat's Plains, where he seemingly gives up on being Mormon by advocating the role to Pandora's actor, representing the shift from Ainz wanting to be a hero to accepting he is the villain, and representing the shift from being a power fantasy to just a dark fantasy. So to sum up, Overlord no longer feels like a power fantasy because the change in viewpoints along with the increasingly dark decisions Ainz enacts make the viewer feel discouraged in self-inserting themselves into Ainz. Which, although may sound like a bad thing, is actually a sign that the anime is more sophisticated and nuanced than the other power fantasy series out there, making it a must watch for all fantasy fans.